And we're live. Okay, so I'd like to point out it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we found a time where Neil does not appear at the meeting. So he does sleep. We checkmate, Neil. You are human. Okay, so let's jump in. And I have to cut at 5, so it's going to be a 1-hour brainstorm. Yes, Ron Burt, organizational bridges. That's what we're going to talk about today. The sociology. Okay, so where we came to, was it yesterday?
Yep. Last
night. Yeah, last night. Wow. Where we came to last night, we had a number of sort of straw polls and pitches. I was just reviewing them. Seems like, am I capturing the zeitgeist reasonably if I say, A, people felt that we could improve on quality, but that even if we did, it wouldn't be enough to drag people over. And thus B, that we should be going for a new, so just make stronger assumptions about what's possible because of quality, and thus go after a different set of use cases. We were particularly interested in sort of human-in-the-loop computational systems, right? Like bots and Soylent-style things, etc. Then C, there was some question about which research components of our platform were going to be the special sauce that we used to sort of anchor the platform. Is that a good? Oh, and the top two vote getters there initially were Boomerang Reputation and the guild levels, like just guilds, basically. Is that a good summary of where we were yesterday?
Yeah.
So sorry, I was just staring at the gray again.
I can move to the white.
No, it's good. It's good. I was just like. Oh,
okay. Yeah, it's a lot of stripes.
Textures, many lines.
Feels, no.
Yeah, much lines. Okay, so what I would propose, and then pitch back to you for opinions, would be that we take maybe 2 or 3 sample sort of applications or demos of this thing, like what people are actually going to use this to do, sort of user-driven, and then back up to what we would need to do to make those happen. That is, which of these research sort of drives that we've been making would actually be empowered by, which would actually empower those applications, and which ones would sort of maybe not be a good fit, for example. So what were the sort of ones that we had generated before, Sharon? Can you remind me? It was like...
one of them was near Trumpify. So Hillary says something and we Trumpify it, or vice versa.
Yeah.
Another one was New York Times in emoji, or New York Times in Dr. Seuss.
Let's pick one of those. Which one do you think had more interest?
I think Dr. Seuss had more interest.
Okay.
There should be.
Trumpify, New York Times, and Dr. Seuss. And then we had a third one, right?
Yeah, summaries of breaking news, like articles, kind of like Sweden.
Okay.
And
why don't we turn it into something that's related, like what Twitter was doing, which is they had people sort of they automatically detected breaking news, and then they had people sort of manually select like the tweets and the kinds of stuff that people actually wanted to see about it. So it's like auto trigger of something that's happening, and then manual curation of like a landing page for it.
Also political fact checking.
Right. So curation of breaking news and PolitiFact Live.
And finally, information extraction. I see as professors at top 20 schools.
Ah. Yeah. Good. Good. Wait, I'm supposed to say excellent if I want to be equal, right? Excellent. Yeah, like that. Okay. So let's take Trumpify for a minute. So the basic architecture of a Trumpify is a script that wakes up every, 5 minutes, checks for whether there's been a Trump tweet in the last 5 minutes. If so, fires off a task to Daemo to Trumpify it. And in the simple version, it would then just post that tweet to our account, right? The slightly more complex version would take the Trump tweet, get a bunch of nominations, so like ask 5 people to try to Trumpify, then launch a separate task that votes between them, then take the high voted one and post it. Is there any difference between these, the simple and the more complex one, that we care about here? For the API purposes, you start getting called out cal, but yeah, it's sort of, we could eventually build a promises kind of framework if we wanted to deal with that. But otherwise, I think it's pretty similar, yeah? So let's take the simpler one for now.
So who creates a vote?
So I think what we would, I'm starting with an assumption that any task interface has been predefined by the user. Although there's a small number of things, as Mark points out, that maybe we could provide like direct API access to. Like maybe a vote thing could be an API, a direct API call. My experience has been that everyone wants to slightly personalize their stuff, and so I don't think that having like pre-wrapped APIs actually gets you as far as people think. Like work is basically defined by its exceptions, not by its norms. So what do we need for Trumpify to work? We basically need people who are creative and funny at doing the transformation, right? And in this case, I can show, I wonder if it's still there. Hold on.
Input knowledge of like, Trump learning.
Right.
Would the workers be the ones Trumpifying it, or requesters, or how does that work? That's Mark.
Woo!
What?
I'm here, but not really.
Okay. We can hear you, but not really. What's something log?
Catherine, to your point, I think we were thinking the workers would be the one.
Okay. So requesters would just be able to like insert, use this API in some way, maybe embed it in their website. Is that how it works? And then a worker can just like be the one to Trumpify things. Or is it like, yeah, where does the requester come in?
So the requester wrote the script. So they're writing a bot. Right?
Okay.
They just do a cron job that launches a script that pulls the most recent Trump tweet. There's been a new one, pushes it to Daemo, takes the response, and pushes it to Twitter.
Okay.
Is it Trump tweets or Hillary tweets?
Oh, sorry, you're right. Hillary tweets.
Okay.
Thank you. So basically, you need someone who's funny and knows how to write with Trump's voice, right? Chances are your average Mechanical Turk worker is probably not so good at this. So what would we need in order to make that work, right? There are a few ways we could go about it. I think the question would be, do you need workers of a specific sort of expertise, or are you just saying like you need good people, like good creative people, right? You could say, we'll take anyone on Daemo and we're just going to try and filter it for highly creative individuals. Another angle would be to say, we're going to let lots of people try it, and then there will be some peer assessment through which the system will auto-qualify people through to do the tasks from there, right? It's just like, we're going to let 20 people try, and then behind the scenes, we're just going to burn some cash and like run some comparisons and say these people are all above the bar for this task, right? So there's like a global leveling for which you use maybe Boomerang or Guilds, or there's sort of like a task-specific qualification. The people versus process paper would suggest that you should just be paying attention to people's overall quality rather than like, are they good at this task? So maybe that's an answer there. Just that basically, like IQ scores are annoying, but there's an important point behind them that people who are good at one task tend to also be good at other ones. So like, rather than try to filter on a per task basis, it's better to just get a global sense of someone's abilities. Mm-hmm. I guess the question would be whether, in addition to that, you want to filter based on someone's skills. Like, do we need to create some set of like Daemo comedy writers, right? That the post is filtered to, or we're just like, whatever, go people go. It would certainly be more powerful if the group were big enough to just be like, yep, we're looking for like failed comedians, post it to the comedians, right? And we're guaranteeing quality for them, and here you go. So it's just like, get a new comedian to Trumpify a tweet, right? It's like, reach any expertise you need in the world. Here we go, comedy writers. Let me grab another one. I guess it would work very similarly in the New York Times Dr. Seuss, right? Yeah. It's just a transformation. It's like creativity writers, basically, right?
Yeah.
Curation of breaking news. Here you might not need any such specific.
Don't need as many.
Maybe someone who actually follows news. That could be a prerequisite.
I mean, you could get someone to compile everything and then someone else to filter it. Yeah.
I mean, for this matter, you could build Facebook M with our platform by basically taking an incoming chat message and then basically going out and recruiting a worker on demand for that new conversation, right? And that worker stays attached to that conversation until it ends, at which point you release them back out and they can join another session or something, right? So basically the code there would look like, you'd have like a basic Flask website where, REST call gets made. What that does is if we already have a worker assigned, we just pass it on. If not, we go get one and bring them in, right? That would be a relatively simple human in the loop, go get someone for this person kind of application. PolitiFact Live feels similar, although you might want to, I guess the task would then give this worker access, say you should go check this source, this source, this source, and this source in general. This is how to go fact check. Helps to have someone who knows American politics again, but maybe not as necessary.
Could we get workers to compile that list?
Maybe. I mean, I suspect that we would probably want to initialize it ourselves.
For us, yeah.
Like in the task. By the way, have some of the chocolates that Durham got me for my birthday. Durham, have some. He considered it. Right, and for information extraction, this would be sort of using the platform in a more batch way. So you just go in, you make the task, and you say, I want someone to get each of these rows, right? That wouldn't necessarily involve code, but it could. I wouldn't do it using code. It would be kind of silly to. Okay, so what do these things all have in common, or at least some of them have in common? Right. Right. So yeah. So let's take as given that you have to author a task for each of these. Like you have to go into Daemo, you have to describe exactly what it is you want. But let's talk about like the technical assumptions that are being made about like how it's recruiting people or who it's recruiting. Like what's in common here?
A subset of them require real time, so we're assuming that you'll have some on real time.
Yeah. So some of these applications require real time. I agree. Which we know can be done. Like this is actually research that I and others have done back in like 2011. I know what I would tell you to build if you want a real-time system.
This includes a wait time.
Yeah, what you would probably do is you would, if I were to design it from the platform side, like from the ground up, what I would do is I would post sort of a task that lets people opt in to like the future tasks, and then when one of them gets posted, then we use WebSockets or something, Redis, etc. on the client side, and we just like we issue a JavaScript alert, and that like pops the tab over to this one and says, "There's something ready for you. Take it now." And they have a limited length of time, like in Uber, to accept. So that I mean, we could definitely do real time if we wanted. The research that basically demonstrated that I could recruit in 5 seconds, which is pretty fast. I mean, this again assumes that they're on the platform, but you know, if there's enough volume, that starts to be the case. And if there's not, we can start to send emails, or maybe we just ask people for like their text, you know, phone to text or something. You know, like if we have to bootstrap it, we can.
Mobile interface.
I mean,
Use Twilio.
yeah, we just use Twilio.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That means by the computer generated voice or the human voice?
Say again?
Is it to generate as computer generated voice or with the real human?
The Twilio API would just be used to send text messages to these workers to say that a task is there. It would only be used to recruit them very quickly. There's no voice involved.
No, when you say Trumpify the Clinton's tweets.
Yeah. You take a Hillary Clinton tweet and then you rewrite it as if Trump wrote it. That's the demo.
Okay. Oh, not to speak.
Yeah, that would be step 2. That would be sweet, but we're not that cool yet.
Okay.
Need a voice actor.
Oh my gosh, my sister is a voice actor.
Really?
Yeah, or she did some stuff.
Sweet. I went to college with the girl who played Helga in Hey Arnold. That was so cool.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, I know. And then she went on to do a PhD in comm, which is pretty sweet.
Whoa.
Yeah. Anyway. Voice acting. Yay. Okay, so there's an aspect of real time, and then there was also the question of sort of expertise filters, right?
Yeah.
That is since we have kind of their history and they've done past tasks.
Well, yeah, it's either based on past tasks or there's some way in which people, like what we talked, let me just sort of pitch what Guilds had articulated, which was that there were a number of different sort of verticals, so to speak. I don't like the term because it implies like business, but like it's like, you know, they're just domains. Like you can be a voice actor, you can be like a writer, you can be an artist, you can be a developer. And the point is that you have not exactly entirely independent, but somewhat independent reputations within each of them. So, you know, in the guilds world, you joined these different guilds and you had different reputations in each guild, right? I've done a lot of great work as a comedy writer, but I'm pretty terrible as an artist, and I could take jobs for either, right, based on my skill. The way that Upwork does this is often that you can take tests within certain areas to demonstrate your skill. This is very problematic because as soon as a test goes up, which they pay a lot of money for the creation of these tests, someone just posts it on a forum, and then everyone can use it and study for it.
Or as a task.
Yeah. Yes, they can repost it and get someone else to do it. Whoa, Mark looks like he's in Top Gun.
Oh yeah.
In a good way. I don't know. I just want to make sure that he doesn't think that I'm like actually, you know, judging him. I'm saying you look cool.
I wouldn't mind if you were judging me.
So, all right. So what we're thinking about here, let me put off real time for the moment because A, I know how to do it.
Yeah.
And B, I think it would improve the applications, but it's not required in order to build them. And let me ask whether we think we need the expertise filter or not. Right? Like, could we let any worker on Daemo build a Trumpify or do the Trumpify? Like, if we're just like, hey, we have a bunch of people who are really good generalists. Doesn't matter what you give them, they'll be decent. Is that enough? Or do you think that we would need, to recruit first workers within a specific area?
If you go the expertise route, how do you check that expertise in the first place?
I think that's when it comes back to the research, systems we've built. I think there are basically two opportunities. One would be, that we've discussed, one is guilds and the other is boomerang. So it would be based on some upskilling or some skill leveling that's done.
It's kind of weird because what if... Go ahead.
Oh, no, you go ahead. I'll also have you.
I was going to say that it's kind of weird because, like, what if someone makes a tweet, some worker, like, would a requester even reject it if it wasn't funny? Like, it's sort of like there's not really an incentive to reject here. Like, I think any sort of tweet would be fine. It would just be unfortunate that it wasn't funny.
Yeah, or it could get filtered out and just never get posted. Right? The Onion generates a ton of jokes, most of which never make it to print. And that's fine.
So I was thinking about this issue because for Boomerang to work, we really need requesters to be interacting with the system a little bit, guilds. But certainly there's a degree to which we need some kind of feedback system to make any of these relevant. And what if we made it so that the feedback wasn't about acceptance or rejection, but it was just like part of the API that some aspect of the sort of happiness of the requester was reflected, by some number that they send back to Daemo. For example, if we had something that builds Trump tweets, could make it so that a Trump tweet that is liked a lot is reflected back on the person who wrote it. So, like, a tweet that's more successful in some way ends up being more valuable to the original author. And right, that's just one case. We could think about this in a lot of other situations where the success of a task isn't governed by being accepted or not, but is governed by some metric that we manage that ends up influencing the reputation of the worker. And so like part of the API is returning that metric at some point. Like you don't have to do it in real time. Maybe do it 3 days later, maybe you do it a week later. But there's like this onus on requesters to return this metric as part of their work.
Right. So
maybe part of their call, let's say.
Time best or something.
yeah, or like what you're basically saying is that there's some. It's almost like how ads at Google use click-through rate and conversions and so on as a way to automatically optimize what gets shown. Right? You can imagine that what our API would let you do is send some feedback that's like, yeah, this worker or this task got 100 retweets or something like that, and it's just whatever you pass it, whatever the sort of fitness function is, and it uses that to essentially. Now, if we're in a boomerang world, then what it would do is use that to determine boomerang, right? So it builds that out into percentiles. So your top, 25% of workers or something by this metric get early access to your tasks. Then there's the middle 50%, and then there's the bottom 25% or something like that. So now it's in your best interest to define a fitness function or a feedback function that will sort of create a virtuous cycle in your application, right? I think the other way to do it through guilds would be to say, well, some proportion of these tweets are going to be just peer-reviewed, and depending on how funny they are, this person's going to level up or not, essentially. I have to say that so at first I think going into this call I wasn't sure whether Boomerang would have any application here, but I do like what you're saying, that just we expect that you provide some sort of fitness function or feedback function, and we transform that into a sort of a Boomerang mechanism for you, right? That would actually
possibly.
Go ahead.
Possibly requesters have the option not to enter a function, and in that they could elect to use the fitness function. So like we could almost think of, and maybe it's not a binary or let's call it a binary. Maybe it's not a binary where it's either like some kind of request for feedback or some kind of worker. It may not provide any feedback. Then they would sort of have to rely on some worker peer feedback, and maybe we
right.
provide a little bit of insight about how that should work.
Okay, so just rolling this out. What you're saying is that there could be some sort of hybrid thing here, where if I give no feedback, then there could be pure feedback used instead. You could likewise, I think we brought up, maybe it was yesterday or before, you could have it sort of be required from the API side. Like, how you could run out of money? You could also run out of reputation credit, so to speak. So it's like, if you try to post a task, but you've gone into debt, you haven't given any feedback on anything, then we actually say, error, you can't actually post any more tasks until you clear out your queue of reviews a little bit. Like, with the expectation being that you review, 1% of your tasks, or 10 per day, whichever is greater, or something like that, right? On the other hand, I'm wondering. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm on cell and it's not very good connection. Anyway, I was thinking that is very interesting, but there's a possibility that people will end up doing some task that is really hard to get feedback on, and that is way too numerous for them to feasibly provide their own insight on, or provide their own feedback on. So I think we would definitely need a way to kind of opt out of giving feedback. Maybe by saying they could pay a little bit extra to have other workers review those tasks, or something like that.
That's a good idea. That's essentially
Did did Michael disappear?
yeah. He had a call, I think.
Oh god, it's getting dark in here. Okay. It's getting dark in the room. Uh, for developers in general, like, so I'm guessing this bot is just a demo, and developers can use the API in different ways, and this is just saying like, oh, you can do something really cool with this, like, it's like just get people's thoughts going. But besides Boomerang, what else could, so I mean, are we going with like our secret sauce is Boomerang in this case?
In that case, yeah.
Okay, just in this case. Okay.
I mean, there is this interesting. Let me just play this out for a minute. Let's say we use only Boomerang with a feedback function, and it's not required, but like if you give it, then it plays in. This might break the incentive compatibility, but let me just think about it for a minute. So now, a few things happen. One, the longer I run my bot, it automatically gets better if I'm giving it feedback, right? So if I provide this retweet count as feedback, then those people get early access through Boomerang, which means that I'm like sort of automatically qualifying them in, and they're doing more of the Trumpification, right? And it also sort of automatically removes the poor performers, right? If I do nothing, like if I don't give any feedback, then the system works, but there's no guarantee that it actually works well because it's an open loop system, right? So that's not terrible, right? It's like you could start with a noisy system and then very quickly get the right people. Like it could be that you could make that work with nothing besides Boomerang in that case, right? There's an incentive for me to always give feedback because that's the only way that the system's actually going to get better. If I don't do that, then we make no guarantees about quality, basically.
Just to push back, so what if, so I know often like requesters are doing this so they don't have to do the work themselves or they don't have to pay attention real time themselves. So how often will they be expected to get feedback?
Well, in the case of the Trumpify, there's like an automatically measurable one, right?
So then it's hands off.
Yeah, and likewise, even if there's not a sort of natural behavioral one, you could spin off other tasks for just explicit peer comparison. So imagine that I built my my PolitiFact Live. Okay, so what I do is I get someone and they fact check and they return it, and then the way that we architect the system is that immediately following that, with some probability, maybe it's 1, maybe it's lower, the callback now issues another task that is a peer assessment task. So it has people review that, or maybe review 2 or 3 and select the best one, and then it sends that feedback back to the system for Boomerang, right? So now you again have turned an open loop thing into a closed loop thing that is getting better over time because it's identifying the good workers. Well, it would work, right?
This is exciting, but I need to go.
Okay.
We miss you.
I'm at an after party for a thing, and so I gotta do my
This is the party, man. Research never ends. Have a great time, Mark.
Bye.
Sorry, what were you saying?
It sort of combines a peer review from guilds, right?
It does.
Yeah.
The one thing that happens is that there's no stable, like, permanent peer assessment, right? It's not like the peers who are doing it are necessarily the good ones.
Oh, right.
Right? So, like, we give up on some of that. But on the other hand, God, I don't know, maybe this works. I've never thought of it in this context. It's like a closed loop system, right? It's a closed loop system that actually has the right incentives and that produces feedback that can be used to generate reputation signals, right? And if I just give everyone low scores, then I'm sort of dooming my own system, right?
Yeah.
Giving everyone low scores is like not giving any scores.
It's basically saying I always want new people.
Yeah.
Right? Because if I give it, well, that's true. It depends on whether we're using percentiles or if we say that there's like a strict numerical range from like 1 to 100 and
worker.
Sorry?
Depends how many workers we have.
Yeah, I mean, I would just argue that I think it depends on like what user model we want to convey. Like there's something compelling about just being able to return the number of retweets as a feedback mechanism. Like no transformation of this, just like say, yep, fitness function return 20 on this one.
It can be fickle though. Like Twitter, just because something becomes popular does not necessarily mean that this is better than other things that are
Right. So, but it's also the case, like, it may also be the case that we would put some hysteresis on Boomerang. So it's like, yep, you gotta, maybe we're taking like an average or something. Like we don't immediately prevent you from, like I think what we had talked about is having a roll, it was like a sliding window average. That allowed for some variation. So if we were doing New York Times and Dr. Seuss, right? I guess what we would do here is we would pull in some RSS feed of the New York Times. We would check, for things that were past, so 5 minutes ago. We would then launch out the task to Seussify. We would get several things back. We'd then launch out another task to do sort of paired or trio comparisons. Maybe that's the kind of thing we could build into the API, where it's like, here are a few different results. Produce a sort of ranked list of, like produce the feedback score by comparing, right?
Oh, okay, yeah. Instead of a binary, would Dr. Seuss write this?
Yeah, I mean, like you could ask workers like rate this on a 1 to 7 scale. How creative is and Seussical is this? But what I tend to see is that there's a real compression, and that everyone gives like 4 out of 7 on everything. So it ends up not being super informative. That's what we found with our original Chi study as well, which is when why we with the more recent WIST study did the forced choice, right? And then we tried to guess them. So I would suggest that we probably do the same thing, where you just like you'd feed it the inputs, and it would run some forced comparison choice things in order to determine a rank, and then return those ranks as the feedback function.
Yeah, that'd be good.
And then that just becomes Boomerang, right? And so you take the people who are good, and the next time the script wakes up and fires off tasks, those people get early access. Now, I guess one thing to consider here is that if you're doing ranking, I just want to lay out this might do a weird loop, because what would happen is, let's say I ask 100 people, and just for sake of argument, let's say I take the top 5 and they get high rankings on Boomerang. I then give early access to them. They do the next task, and now I'm ranking within those 5. So now someone who was at the top is actually now at the bottom, right? Because the task has shifted, right? Like the comparison set has shifted. So if we wanted to make that actually work, one approach would be to continue to compare against. Oh, hey Leonardi. One approach would be to compare against previous stuff as well. So like when you pass it for the comparison, you're actually maintaining a history of stuff you've already compared to. So you're doing almost a binary search into the full, like to create the full ranking. So it's not just these. It's just like, yep, we're comparing this class of thing, and where is it falling in the pachinko machine, right? But I feel like, so this is a problem, but I feel like it could be solved.
You would still need to get like the non-top workers to still be generating things, because otherwise their terrible responses will constantly be used to measure against the new best responses.
Right. Well, or you just use the old ones, right?
But they're already.
What if it's something that cannot be compared?
So, can you give an example?
So the task, let's say, evolves after the first run.
Mm-hmm. So now you rotate from Dr. Seuss to Dostoevsky.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now you cannot compare those.
Mm-hmm. So now you're just getting a ranking. Yeah, I think the question is, if you're just getting a ranking, you get a rank, but it's not clear that this is better or, like, it's not clear that which number is good or bad. It's just you get a ranking, right? That's the downside. So it might be, there are different ways of dealing with this. One would be to do something complementary. So you do a ranking, but then you also do some sort of like just absolute scale measure. Another would be that we complicate Boomerang slightly, such that okay, I don't know exactly how to describe this in a formal mechanism yet, but essentially, if you're imputing, so it's like, we know that I gave this terrible person a 1 and this great person 100, right? And then in another round, let's say that there's bad, medium, and great, right? So there's 0, 50, and 100, and I gave those 3 values. Okay, so now in another round, even if it's on a different task, I took medium and great. Sorry, that this new person came out like between medium and great. Even though medium is now at the bottom of the list, we have previous data anchoring them somewhere, in the middle. So it's like we have a little bit more data to be able to. We're not saying that they're terrible. We're just saying, we're just we're building a ranking over time. I don't know. So it might be that. Okay. Well, let me ask if we could do it the other way. So basically the problem here is that by doing ranking, you're not getting. The mapping is confusing. So like people might be good, but be at the bottom of the ranked list, right? Whereas Boomerang wants to know who you want less of and who you want more of. So let's see if there's a way to get that more directly, right? So you take these responses. Let's see. So one thing you could do is you could inject, this is still using ranking, so I'm not sure it's perfect, but you could inject known benchmarks into it. So whenever you're doing the comparison, you basically say, this is my rank score. Anything below that's ranked below this one is I want less of. Like here's an example medium, right? And here's an example great one. So if it's as good or better than this one, I want more of them, right? Like I give some benchmarks in the space. That it's sort of like having gold standards of like known quality. That would allow the algorithm to work autonomously, right? So you get a ranking, so you get some scores within, some detail within, but then you also know, objectively they're all good, right?
Don't that have weird issues with like subjective interpretation of like how good something is? Right?
Yeah.
If I root it and say this is what's like the medium, this is what's good, this is what's bad.
Yeah.
Am I supposed to rate based on what you think is good and bad, or what I think is good?
It's a good question. I think in general, it depends on the language you use, right? You can tell people like this. Typically, what requesters will do is be like this one's good, and here's why it's good. This one's bad, and here's why it's good. And you're trying to get the worker to understand your criteria.
Okay.
I was imagining we don't even show them what's good or bad, and we kind of see like where they fall according to our good bad.
That would be another reasonable way to do it. It's just hidden. You just tell them, is this good or bad? Tell me your opinion.
Yeah.
And then, but we know just through some piloting that like people tend to agree with us or something. He was basically asking, what if people disagree with you?
Yeah. I mean, initially you could do this, and then later on with the retweets.
Right. Well, so the question is, okay, so if someone gets 0 retweets, does that mean we want less of them? And we might, but they might also be okay. And as you said, like not everything that's great on Twitter gets retweeted.
Or what's the purpose of this? Is it to get retweets?
I think it would
really
be
popular. Yeah. So then in that case, that's
right.
Success metric.
But the question, like, what's nice about this is like AdWords with a conversion, it's just like you've directly connected your success metric back to the system. And the question is, how do we translate that into Boomerang, right? If you constantly get 0 retweets, intuitively, you probably want to give late access, right? But it might be that that's okay, right? Like, how do we know the difference between that being fine and that being not fine? Do we say just
Fine means
it's like
getting constantly zeros and
yeah. So I guess I'm saying is getting zeros deserving in the Boomerang parlance, is that deserving of a check minus or a check, right?
What would warrant a check minus if we can put that? Like a definite check minus.
I mean, if I were building such a bot and they were just bad tweets or just consistently never got any uptake, like they weren't funny, that would be a check minus for me, right? I want less of them. And a check would be, if it gets some engagement, a check plus would be a lot. But I would feel comfortable letting the system do that optimization. So the question is just like, if there's no built-in fitness function, how do you do this? Like the point is that with the comparisons, you're actually getting a sliding scale where you're sampling at different, like you start out here and then you're sampling 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 here, right? But by adding in the benchmarks, then you no longer have the sliding scale. If you just have the private pre-annotated good, medium, and bad ones, then you do know that this one's always bad, right?
Or we could do like the idea of we just give them the ones that we had done beforehand to get a sense of if they're somewhat good at rating.
Mm-hmm.
And then not rely on our benchmark entirely.
Catherine?
Is the retweeting, is that something that we can actually measure? Like
yeah, the code can...
It can take? Yeah, because like, yeah, what if some tweets, are never retweeted? Do we even need, like, could that just be our internal metric of how good the worker is? Like, do we need,
I think that's the proposal, is that the code would regularly go out, see how many retweets the thing got, and just pass that back to the API as the performance metric.
This would only before this demo.
No, so I think what's on in this demo, yeah. I mean,
in this demo, like we couldn't really scale this to anything else, but in this case, it works.
Well, and then the question is, if let's say that now with like Dr. Seussifying the New York Times, like maybe you get clicks, but let's say for starters, you don't actually have any viewers on your web page. So then the question that we're asking is, how would you produce a feedback function there? And the question is, would it work to just use peer assessment? So you take your results, you fire out a comparison task back to Daemo, and you use that maybe by injecting a couple ones of known quality, and then you just return the rank, and you go from there, or something like that. Again, the ranks would still switch. So it's like if you started with bad, medium, and good, right? So now you're going to have things falling in that spectrum. And so hopefully bad would be near like rank n, where n's the largest number, right? Well, let's say let's sort in increasing order. So 1 means worst, right? So now 1 means it's really bad. Somewhere near like, n over 2 is like it's okay, and then n is really good. So now your boomerang is going to happen again, resample new workers. Now rank n over 2 actually means something far better, right? We don't have a stable number.
We can enforce a stable number.
How?
Then we just have the max and min be different.
So you just rescale the numbers based on the positions, the relative positions of the bad and the medium ones, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I guess that just assumed.
You could do that, right? You could say, if you know the distance between, so for example, what you could do is you could say, we know that this one, that the bad, its value, there's no rank, it's just its value is 1. The medium one, its value is 50. The good one, its value is 100. Okay, now we take all of these ranks and we sort of impute a distance. So it's like, it goes, if we see bad, medium, good, and then everything else, then we might say like, well, so now imagine that each thing is worth 50. So it's like, 0, 50, 100, and then the values of all these other ones are, 150, 200, 250, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas if it's like you have some down here, then you might be imputing values like 0, 25, 50, 75, et cetera. You're just sort of rescaling. But this might just be something that we could do on, like if the peer comparison feedback is such a common case, which it might be, this might be something that we could just build on our side as like an API thing, and then we can figure out a slightly more technical mechanism of doing this so that their code doesn't have to worry about it. All they have to do is call an API that like feeds the results that they got, and then we figure out how to turn that into a closed loop. I kind of like this, I have to admit. If we were eventually to like connect it with something where like I'm recruiting a Photoshop expert to, what do we talk about, like Photoshop my wedding photos or something like that. This is probably not a bot, but then we would just be using straight up like user interface boomerang, right? We would just be like, hey, next time you ask for something like this, do you want this person to have early access, be with the normal pool, or get late access, right? So it's sort of, it backs off to something natural, right? I guess maybe put it this way. If we were to do the information extraction demo, right? Like go to each of these university schools, for each university get every faculty member, the year they graduated their PhD, and the institution where they got their PhD, right? So now we get, let's say, 20 different workers, each who does one university. So now I go into the Daemo interface and would presumably work just like we've designed Daemo to work, sort of with the batch tasks, right? So you review them, you give them a check plus, check, or check minus, and you're done. So the back off is natural in that case.
Can I ask a question about the API?
Yeah.
I think I might have missed a conversation as to why we're making Daemo an API. Is it just for app developers, or was there like a bigger purpose of why making Daemo as an API is it's like why we would do that? Or like there was any explanation?
Daemo will still do exactly what it does now, but the discussion yesterday was basically said, look, just improving quality doesn't matter, so we need to show new kinds of applications. The kinds of applications that people seemed most interested in trying to pursue were ones by app developers, bot developers, and in order to do that, basically what we would have to do is build a client API to Daemo and show the code. Just be like, you want to build this thing? Look, here's the code. It works. Sort of like, it's this easy to integrate Stripe into your application. Just be like, it's this easy to integrate Daemo into your application. That's all.
Okay. And we could just, if we want, like, we could replace the word Daemon with crowdsourcing. So, like, we can integrate crowdsourcing into whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Daemo is the thing that does it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have 1 minute before I have to run. I don't know. I'm kind of into this. I think we need to figure out exactly how the peer comparison thing would exactly work in a way that, like, we need to think about, like, okay, so if you iterate on this, like, do you then get, stable numbers over time? But if someone's interested in thinking about that and designing an algorithm for it, assuming, I guess in this case critically, it would have to assume the same evaluation set each time. So, like, if you have a new task,
responses.
I mean, we really have to think about it, like what happens. I mean, how do you compare those top 5 to the new ones?
Yeah. So I'm willing to make the following assumptions. Assuming the task is the same, so you're not switching from Seuss to Dostoevsky. If you switch to Dostoevsky, you have to start from scratch.
Right.
And you're getting new inputs all the time. What is the correct way to get the feedback function? And let's assume that the feedback function for now is bounded, or is unbounded between, like, it's negative infinity to infinity or something like that. So we need to ask A, how do we translate that into boomerang scores? And B, how do you get a stable number out of it if there's no objective metric, right? So let's say that the only thing we can do is have peer comparisons. I'm actually pretty confident we can do this, like, just for the basic reason that in the worst case we can back off to a Likert scale evaluation. Like I said, everything will give you 4 out of 7, but you would be able to do it, right? You would get a little bit of signal, and that could be turned over time into percentiles, which we could use to bootstrap the good people. It would just be slower. Okay. Looking at schedule. Maybe we should chat again on either Thursday morning after the scrum or Thursday afternoon. Maybe Thursday after the scrum would be a good time to try again. Seem reasonable? Does anyone want to give a shot at this comparison algorithm? See if you can find a stable way to do it. All right. So Durham, you'll DRI, but anyone who's interested, like, just grab some time with each other and whiteboard it.
Yeah, sure.
Sweet. All right. Catherine, anything else you want to add?
No, I think I'm okay. Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
Okay. See you guys.
All right.
Bye.